help me reach 1,000 subscribers. Please like the video and share your thoughts on the video. Your feedback helps make the contents better. Now let's get to the story.
My phone buzzed at 6:47 in the morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had already gone cold, going through a stack of financial reports like I did every single morning. My brother's name lit up the screen. I picked up without thinking twice. "Hey man, what's up?" I said, barely looking away from the papers in front of me. There was a pause. Just a second too long. The kind of pause that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up before your brain even knows why. "Hey." His voice was low, almost like he was whispering. "Is Vanessa home right now?" I frowned and looked toward the hallway. I could hear the shower running upstairs. Or at least I thought I could. The water had been running for a while actually. Longer than usual. "Yeah," I said. "She's home. I think she's in the shower." "Why?" Another pause. "That's not possible, man." "What do you mean?" "I literally just—" "She just boarded my flight," he said. His voice dropped even lower. "I'm looking right at her. She's in business class. C3. And she is not alone." The coffee cup in my hand stopped halfway to my mouth. I sat completely still for what felt like a full minute but was probably about 4 seconds. The kind of stillness where your whole body is trying to catch up with what your ears just heard. "Say that again," I said. And he did. "My name is Daniel Reeves. I am 41 years old. I am a forensic auditor, which basically means companies pay me to find money that has been hidden, stolen, moved around, or disguised as something it is not. I spend my days following paper trails, cross-checking numbers that don't add up, and catching people in lies they thought were airtight. I have helped expose corporate fraud worth millions of dollars. I have sat across the table from CEOs and watched their faces fall apart when I showed them the proof. I'm very good at my job. The funny thing about being really good at catching liars for a living is that you never expect to need those skills at home. You figure, of all people, I should be able to spot the signs. Right? Well, let me tell you something. Love makes you stupid. Not a little stupid. A lot stupid. The embarrassing kind of stupid that you don't even notice until someone calls you from 30,000 feet in the air and drops a bomb right in the middle of your morning. Vanessa and I had been married for 6 years. We met at a conference in Atlanta. She was in hotel management, I was there for a keynote on financial forensics, and she bumped into me near the buffet line and knocked a full plate of scrambled eggs onto my shirt. She apologized about 17 times. I told her it was fine about 16 times. By the end of the night, we were sharing a bottle of wine and laughing like we had known each other for years. We got married 14 months later. She was smart and funny, and she had this way of walking into a room like she already owned it. I loved that about her. I loved a lot of things about her. Which is exactly why what I am about to tell you hit me the way it did. My brother, Tyler, is a commercial airline pilot. 11 years of flying routes up and down the East Coast and occasionally overseas. He knows faces. Part of the job. You see thousands of passengers and you develop a memory for people, especially the ones who fly your routes more than once. He had met Vanessa at our wedding, at Christmas dinners, at birthday parties. He knew her face the same way he knew the instrument panel in front of him. There was no mistaking her. Thank you so much for being here and staying with me so far. Before we continue, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I truly love seeing how far these stories travel. And just to be clear, this story includes some fictionalized details used to help explain the situation and its meaning. Any similarity to real individuals or settings is unintentional, but the message I'm sharing is something I believe can genuinely help you. After Tyler told me what he saw, I did not run upstairs screaming. I did not throw the coffee mug across the room. I am a forensic auditor. I go quiet when things get serious. My brain shifts into a different gear. It is almost automatic at this point. The emotions were there, sitting under the surface like a fire trying to get through a sealed door. But the professional side of me slammed a lock on that door and started making a mental list. First thing I did after I hung up with Tyler was walk upstairs. The shower was still running. I pushed the bathroom door open slowly. Steam. Empty shower. The water had been running on its own. The shower knob had been turned on and left. No Vanessa. No wet towels on the floor. No fog on the mirror that looked fresh. I pressed my hand against the mirror. Barely warm. That shower had been running for a while. Long enough to feel like someone was in there to anyone who happened to be downstairs drinking cold coffee and reading reports. I went to the bedroom. Her side of the closet. I opened it and stood there for a second just looking. Her carry-on bag was gone. The small burgundy one she used for short trips. Her good toiletry bag, the leather one I got her for our anniversary, also gone. 2 or 3 outfits worth of space had opened up on the rail. I would not have noticed any of this walking past the closet on a normal morning. You do not notice the shape of absence until you are specifically looking for it. I walked back downstairs and sat at the kitchen table. I pulled out my laptop. The first thing a forensic auditor learns is that people are sloppy. They think they have covered everything. They never have. There is always a thread sticking out somewhere, and if you pull it gently and with patience, the whole sweater comes apart. Vanessa thought she was married to a man who spent his days crunching numbers. She did not understand that crunching numbers is finding lies. Every single day, I started pulling the thread. Our joint account first. I was already on the bank's portal. I went back 3 months. At first glance, everything looked normal. Groceries. Yes. Her gym membership. A few online shopping orders. But I know how to look at spending the way a photographer knows how to look at light. You are not just seeing what is there. You are seeing the shape of what is not there. The pattern breaks. 6 weeks ago, a charge from a travel agency I did not recognize. $47. Small. Forgettable. Exactly the kind of charge most spouses would scroll right past. I wrote it down. 3 weeks ago, a charge at a luggage store 2 towns over. She had told me she was meeting a friend for lunch that day. 2 weeks ago, a restaurant I had never heard of. A Tuesday. She had told me she was working late. I opened our shared cloud storage next. We had set it up years ago to back up photos automatically from both our phones. It was something we agreed to do together. She had forgotten it was there. Or maybe she thought I had forgotten. Either way, for a forensic auditor, finding a shared cloud account that someone forgot about is basically the same as finding a signed confession in a filing cabinet. I started going through the photos quietly. Now here is where I want to pause because this is the part that shifts the whole story in a direction I absolutely did not see coming, and I want you to follow it carefully. If you have been reading along and thinking you know where this is going, I promise you, you do not. But before I get there, if this story is hitting close to home or making you think about someone you know, hit that subscribe button. I share stories like this every week. Stories about real situations, real betrayals, and the kind of quiet strength it takes to come out the other side standing. You do not want to miss what comes next. The photos in the cloud were mostly normal. Gym selfies, meals, screenshots of things she liked online. Then I found a folder. It was not labeled anything suspicious. It was just a string of numbers, the way your phone automatically names a folder sometimes. But the date on it was recent. I opened it. There were about 40 photos inside. I will not describe all of them, but I will tell you this. The man in the photos with my wife was not some random stranger. He was not someone I had never seen before. His face was not a mystery to me. It was my business partner. His name was Greg Holloway. Greg and I had built our forensic auditing firm together 8 years ago, 2 years before I even met Vanessa. We had worked side by side through everything. Late nights, difficult clients, celebrating wins together. He had been at my wedding. He had given a toast. He had looked me in the eye and called me his brother. I sat at that kitchen table for about 20 minutes and did not move. Then I made myself another cup of coffee, this one hot, and I got back to work. See, here's the thing. When you discover something like this, you have 2 choices. You can react, or you can respond. Reacting is for people who want to feel better in the moment. Responding is for people who want to win. I had spent my entire career teaching clients the difference between those 2 things. I was not about to forget the lesson now. I spent the next several days doing what I do best. I dug. I went into our firm's internal financial records. I had full access. Obviously, it was half my company. I had not audited our own books recently because why would I? I trusted Greg. I trusted him completely. That trust, as it turned out, had been a very expensive mistake. What I found over those next few days made the cheating look almost minor by comparison. Greg had been skimming from the firm for almost 2 years. Not in huge chunks. Small withdrawals moved through a series of what looked like vendor payments. The vendors did not exist. I recognized the shell company structure immediately because it was almost exactly like a scheme I had helped prosecute for a client 18 months ago. Greg had been in the room when I explained exactly how it worked. He had apparently taken notes. The total amount came to just over $340,000. $340,000. I sat back in my chair and laughed. Not a happy laugh. The kind of laugh that comes out of you when the absurdity of a situation reaches a level your body just cannot process any other way. This man had stolen from me. And then he had gone home and whatever else he was doing with my wife. And every Monday morning he had walked into our office, poured himself a cup of coffee, and looked me in the eye like everything was perfectly fine. The audacity. The actual, breathtaking, gold medal level audacity. I almost admired it. Almost. I want to stop here and just say something directly to you. If you have ever felt like you were the last person to know something about your own life, like everyone around you was reading a book that you were not allowed to see, this part of the story is for you. Because what Daniel was dealing with was not just betrayal. It was the feeling that your entire reality had been quietly rewritten without your permission. And that is one of the loneliest feelings a human being can experience. If that connects with you even a little, subscribe. Because this community is built around stories that remind you that surviving that feeling is not just possible. It is something you come out of stronger. Now, back to Daniel. I did not confront Vanessa when she got back. She came home 2 days after Tyler's call. Walked through the front door with her burgundy carry-on, kissed me on the cheek, and told me the conference she had supposedly been at was exhausting but productive. She even had a tote bag from the city she claimed to have been in. She had bought it as a prop. An actual prop. I smiled and asked her about her flight. She said it was fine. A little bumpy over the Midwest. I nodded and went back to the kitchen to finish making dinner. Inside I was completely calm. Not numb. Not checked out. Actually calm. The kind of calm that comes from knowing something the other person does not know you know. Over the next 3 weeks I built my case like I was preparing for the biggest audit of my career. Because I contacted a private investigator, someone I had worked with on several corporate cases over the years. A woman named Diane who was sharp, professional, and had absolutely no patience for nonsense. I told her what I needed. She got to work. By the end of week 2 she had given me a complete picture of the situation including dates, locations, hotel receipts, and photographs that were about 10 times more detailed than anything I had found in the cloud. At the same time, I finished documenting every single fraudulent transaction Greg had run through the firm. I had it organized into a report that was 46 pages long, color-coded, cross-referenced, and backed up on 3 different encrypted drives in 3 different locations. I sent copies to 2 different attorneys and 1 to my personal accountant, just in case. Then I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a divorce attorney, one of the best in the state. Her name was Margaret, and when I walked into her office and handed her Diane's report and my own financial documentation, she looked up at me over her glasses and said, "Mr. Reeves, this is the most organized discovery package I have ever received from a client walking through that door." I told her I was in the business. She smiled and said, "Well then, let us make sure your wife's attorney earns their fee." The second call was to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I had worked with agents there before on corporate fraud cases. I knew who to call. I knew how to talk to them. I sent them the same 46-page report with a brief summary email. They called me back within 48 hours. Everything was now in motion. The machine was running. All I had to do was time it right. I chose a Thursday. Greg and I had standing Thursday morning meetings at the office. Coffee at 9, go through the week's cases, plan ahead for the next one. It had been our routine for years. I wanted the last meeting we ever had to feel exactly like all the others right up until it did not. I got to the office early that morning. Made the coffee myself. Set out 2 mugs. Put a small folder on the table, face down like it was just some paperwork I needed to go through. Greg came in at 9:03, which was typical for him. He was the kind of person who was always just slightly late in a way that was never late enough to actually call out. He poured his coffee, sat across from me, leaned back in his chair with that easy smile he had always had. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I said. We went through the first 20 minutes of the meeting completely normally. I let him talk about 2 of our current cases. I asked follow-up questions. I even laughed at a joke he made about a client we both found difficult. I was present, engaged, normal. Then I slid the folder across the table to him. "Take a look at that when you get a chance," I said, like I was handing him a quarterly update. He picked it up, flipped it open. The first page was a 1-paragraph summary of the fraud. The second page was the first of 32 transaction records I had traced directly back to him, each one highlighted and annotated in my handwriting. The third page was a photograph. Not from the cloud. From Diane. I watched his face. I have watched a lot of faces in my career. I have seen people go through shock, denial, anger, calculation, all in the space of about 4 seconds when they realize they have been caught. Greg's face went through all of those. But there was something else there too. Something I had not expected. He looked tired. Not surprised. Not panicked. Tired. Like a man who had been waiting for something for a long time and had finally stopped being able to pretend it was not coming. He closed the folder. "How much do you know?" he said. "Everything," I said. He nodded slowly. Looked down at the coffee mug in his hand. Then he looked up at me and said, "Are you going to let me explain?" "No," I said. "I am not." I stood up, picked up my coffee, and walked to the door. Then I stopped and turned back. "The FBI will be reaching out to you today or tomorrow," I said. "Your attorney should probably know that before they do." I walked out. I drove home, and on the way I called my divorce attorney and told her it was time to file. The papers were served to Vanessa that same afternoon while she was at the gym. She called me 6 times in a row after that. I let them all go to voicemail. Then I sent her a single text message. "I know about Greg. I know about the trips. My attorney will be in touch with yours. Please do not call this number again." I sat on the back porch of our house with a fresh cup of coffee, the good beans I had been saving for a special occasion, and I looked out at the yard and listened to the quiet. There is a particular kind of peace that comes after you have survived something that was trying to destroy you. It is not a loud peace. It is not a celebration. It is more like the feeling after a very long storm finally passes and you step outside and the air is clean and sharp and you realize that the house is still standing. I had been living inside a lie for a long time without knowing it, and now I was outside of it. The air was cold and it was a little sharp around the edges, and the next chapter of my life was completely uncertain, and I did not care about any of that. I was outside the lie. That was enough for right now. But this is not where the story ends. Because here is the plot twist I have been building toward. The one I mentioned at the beginning. The one that changed the entire shape of everything. 3 weeks after I filed for divorce. 2 weeks after Greg was formally contacted by the FBI and retained a criminal defense attorney. 1 week after Vanessa moved her things out of the house and into an apartment that, interestingly, was not Greg's apartment. My brother Tyler called me again. I picked up immediately this time. "You doing okay?" he asked. "Getting there," I said. "Good." Pause. "Listen. There is something I did not tell you when I called that morning. Something I have been going back and forth about whether to say." I leaned forward. "Tell me," I said. "When I saw Vanessa on my flight," Tyler said, "she was not sitting next to Greg." I blinked. "What?" "She was alone in 3A. The man I saw her with, I saw them together in the boarding area before the flight. They were talking, standing close, looked like they knew each other well. But on the plane they did not sit together. And when I looked at the manifest to confirm who she was, I looked at the seat next to her. The passenger in 3B. Another pause. It was a woman. Named Dr. Patricia Holloway. The room went very still around me. Greg's wife. I said. His sister, Tyler said. I stood up from my chair. Tyler. Who was the man in the boarding area? I ran the manifest for the whole flight, Tyler said. I found him. His name is Richard Park. Seat 22C. Economy. I looked him up. And? He's a private investigator, Danny. based out of Charlotte. The silence that followed was about 5 seconds long, but it felt like a full hour. I sat back down very slowly. Vanessa hired a PI, I said. Not a question. Just saying it out loud to see how it tasted. That is what it looks like, Tyler said. But here is the part that is really going to get you. I did some more digging after that, because I could not sleep. And I am not sure, but I think Patricia Holloway hired Vanessa. Hired her for what? I said, even though some part of me was already assembling the answer. To catch Greg, Tyler said. Patricia has known about the money for almost a year. But she needed more. She needed documented proof of the affairs, of the travel, the whole thing. She needed someone on the inside. Someone Greg trusted. I put the phone down on the table and stared at the wall. Vanessa had not been cheating on me. Vanessa had been undercover. I called Vanessa that same night. First time I had spoken to her since the text message. She picked up on the second ring. I know, I said. I need you to explain it to me from the beginning. What she told me over the next hour was this. Patricia Holloway had approached Vanessa 8 months ago. Patricia had discovered irregularities in some accounts she had shared access to through the marriage. She suspected Greg was hiding money and using a business partner's firm as the vehicle. She had tried to investigate on her own but could not get close enough to the numbers. She needed someone who had legitimate access to the financial environment, someone Greg already trusted, someone who could build a picture from the inside without raising suspicion. Vanessa was in hotel management. She had no financial background, but she had access to me. And more importantly, she had Greg's trust by association. Patricia had spent 3 months building a relationship with Vanessa before she told her what she suspected. And when she finally laid it all out, Vanessa had agreed to help. The trips were not romantic getaways. They were meetings with Patricia and with the private investigator, Richard Park, who was coordinating the documentation effort. The man Tyler had seen them with in the boarding area had been Richard. Patricia had been on the same flight. Vanessa had not told me because she was terrified of what would happen if Greg found out before they had enough evidence. She was terrified that if I knew, my reaction might tip him off. She knew my background. She knew that once I started pulling threads I would not stop. And she was right about that, as it turned out. I was protecting you, she said. And I was protecting Patricia. And I am so sorry for what I put you through. I wanted to tell you every single day. You have no idea how hard it was to walk back through that door and look at your face and know what you must have been thinking. I was quiet for a long time. You should have told me, I said finally. I know, she said. We are going to talk about that for a very long time, I said. I know, she said again. But, I said, and I could hear her breathing stop on the other end of the line. I understand why you did it. She let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for 8 months. We talked for another 2 hours that night. About everything. About what she had seen and found. About what I had found. About the fact that between the two of us, working completely separately without knowing the other was doing the same thing, we had built a case against Greg Holloway that was probably the most thorough piece of forensic documentation either of us had ever been involved in. I withdrew the divorce filing the following week. Margaret, my attorney, looked at me over her glasses again when I told her. Plot twist, she said. You have no idea, I said. What happened to Greg Holloway in the end was not quick. These things never are. But it was thorough. Which in my experience is much better than quick. The FBI investigation took 7 months. At the conclusion of it, Greg was charged with wire fraud, financial fraud, and tax evasion. The total amount he had stolen was eventually calculated at just under $400,000 after they found 2 accounts I had missed in my initial audit. He reached a plea agreement that included full restitution, 5 years of supervised probation, a lifetime ban from working in financial services, and 400 hours of community service. He did not go to prison, which frustrated me briefly. I will not pretend it did not. But the conviction was real. The restitution was real. The professional destruction was real. Greg Holloway would never work in this field again. His name was attached to a federal fraud case that would come up every time anyone searched for him for the rest of his life. Patricia Holloway filed for divorce the same week charges were filed and received a settlement that included the majority of their shared assets, a sum that, combined with the restitution payments, put her in a very comfortable position going forward. As for the firm, I bought Greg out. His shares were now worthless under the terms of the legal proceedings, so I acquired them at a negotiated price through the attorneys that was about as low as it could legally go. The firm had a strong reputation built on 8 years of real work, and that reputation had been built mostly on cases I had personally managed. I rebranded, brought on 2 new partners, and within 18 months the revenue had grown to the highest point in the company's history. I hired Diane, the private investigator who had helped me, as a full-time contractor. Best professional decision I made that entire year. Vanessa went back to work in hotel management and eventually moved into consulting for hospitality companies. She was good at it in a way that reminded me of why I had fallen for her at that buffet table all those years ago. That same quality of walking into a room like she already owned it, but now I understood it differently. It was not arrogance. It was the look of a woman who had done something very difficult and very quiet and had never asked for any credit for it. We had a long road back to each other. It would be dishonest to make it sound simple or fast or easy. There were hard conversations and long silences and more than a few nights where the distance between us felt too wide to cross. But we crossed it. Slowly, on our own terms, with a lot of patience and a lot of honesty, and a marriage counselor in Raleigh who was worth every single dollar. On our 7th anniversary we went back to Atlanta, to the same hotel where we had met. I ordered scrambled eggs from the buffet and put the plate on the edge of the table closest to her. She looked at the plate, looked at me. "You want me to knock that onto you?" she said. "I want you to knock that onto me," I said. She laughed. A real laugh, the kind that reaches her eyes and makes lines at the corners of them. And she pushed the plate just enough that it tipped off the edge and eggs went all down the front of my shirt. A woman at the next table looked over, horrified. Vanessa covered her mouth, shoulders shaking. I looked down at my shirt and then up at her, and I thought, this is it. This is what surviving something looks like. It does not look like a clean shirt and a quiet house and everything perfectly in order. It looks like scrambled eggs on your shirt and the woman you love laughing across the table from you, and the knowledge that you got through the worst of it together, even when you did not know you were doing it together. That is the thing about people who love you and the people who betray you. They can look exactly the same from the outside for a very long time. The difference only shows up under pressure. Under the kind of pressure that strips everything back and shows you what is actually there. Greg Holloway showed me who he was under pressure. So did Vanessa. And what I found, when I finally stopped panicking long enough to look clearly, was that I was a man who had been loved more carefully and more quietly than I had known. By a woman who had walked into a dangerous situation on my behalf without telling me, because she knew that telling me would have made it worse. That is either the most reckless thing a person can do for someone they love or the bravest. Probably both. I had spent my career finding the truth in the numbers. I had forgotten that sometimes the truth is not in the numbers at all. Sometimes it is in the person who is willing to stand in the fire to make sure you do not get burned. I am still a forensic auditor. I'm still very good at catching liars. I still drink my morning coffee before it goes cold now, because some lessons you learn the hard way and then you carry them. And every time the phone rings early in the morning, I look at the caller ID before I pick up, just in case it is Tyler. And that, my friends, is where Daniel's story ends. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with scrambled eggs and a real laugh and a marriage that came out stronger than it went in. If this story moved you, surprised you, or made you feel something you were not expecting to feel today, then it did exactly what it was supposed to do. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and tell me where in the world you are watching from. Seriously, every single comment makes my day. I read them all. And here is why it matters to me more than you might think. When I see where you are all coming from, it reminds me that these stories are not just reaching one corner of the world. They are traveling. And that is something truly special. To my incredible viewers in the United States, you all show up every single time and the support never gets old. Thank you. To my amazing family in the Philippines, I see you in the comments every week, and your warmth and loyalty means everything to this channel. To my wonderful viewers up in Canada, always steady, always thoughtful, always appreciated. And a huge special shout out to everyone watching from New York specifically. You already know you are built different. If this story hit home, do one simple thing before you leave. Hit that subscribe button. New stories drop every week and you do not want to be the last one to find out what happens next. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Until next time, take care of yourself and never stop paying attention.